There are a number of ways that lead poisoning can occur, but the most common ways that lead poisoning occurs is to young children. Children who are just learning to crawl or to walk. And what happens is you have paint in an apartment that contains lead, and the paint either chips or peels off the walls, and the child will take that paint and maybe stick it in their mouth, or the paint almost becomes dust on certain what we call friction surfaces. So you have windows or windowsills where there's constant rubbing. And when that happens, the paint frays to the point where it becomes very small, almost like dust. And the child can either breathe that in directly, or they can crawl around on the floor, they can get on their hands, they can put that in their mouth, and they can ingest it that way. But the bigger concern about lead is the long-term effects that can have on a child. It's well documented among doctors that lead has terrible long-term effects on the cognitive development of children. Their brains are still forming, and the metal from the lead that gets into the system, it disrupts that, it gets in the way of that. And we see children all the time who have lead poisoning, who have cognitive issues, who have attention deficit issues, hyperactivity issues, issues at school, learning disabilities, and those issues can affect them as they go on in life. It can affect their ability to have jobs, and it can affect them in their relationships. There are potentially very severe consequences that can affect that child for the rest of his or her life.
With lead paint, it's always the older buildings, because anything built after 1960 doesn't have lead. So a lot of these buildings are the ones that are before 1960. NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, happens to all be built before 1960. So it's been a big problem over the years with housing authority buildings having lead paint. You can definitely sue the housing authority. Once you find out if there's lead, you call a lawyer and we file a notice of claim within 90 days and then file a lawsuit within a year and 90 days. We have many lawsuits against the housing authority. So now a lot of these buildings have lead paint in them, and unfortunately a lot of them have young children in them. They also don't keep up their buildings, so there's peeling paint. So a combination of peeling paint, lead, and little kids leads to unfortunately a lot of lead paint levels.
Any doctor will tell you that the effects that the lead poisoning has on a child will be permanent. Not all of the effects would necessarily be permanent, but there probably will be permanent effects on that child's development. Some are affected greater than others, and also some have different amounts of poisoning than others. The CDC has said that any blood lead level above 5 is considered dangerous. So you have some children that test at a 5 or a 6 or a 7, which is not good at all, and that can certainly have effects on those children for the rest of their lives. I've had clients who've had lead levels in the 30s, 40s. I even had one child at a 55. You can imagine the devastating effects that'll have on a child's development for the rest of his or her life. It's a very serious matter, and it can have a real impact, particularly on children. It can affect their development, and it can affect them for the rest of their lives. And your child would be entitled to a recovery depending on the effects that lead poisoning has had on them. So if your child has suffered from elevated levels of lead, you should contact an attorney right away so that your child's rights are protected. The first thing an attorney would do for you if you have a child that's been poisoned by lead is obtain the records necessary to determine who is at fault for that and who a claim can be pursued against. Most often, the way that you even found out that your child has high levels of lead is from a lead test either at your doctor's office or at a hospital. By law, if that level comes back high, that doctor has to send those results to the Department of Health. Once the Department of Health sees a high lead level test, they are immediately going to send an investigator to your apartment where you live to do a testing of that apartment to determine if there is lead paint in that apartment. It's very dangerous for children to suffer from elevated lead levels. So the Department of Health has an interest in finding out where that lead came from that caused your child to have elevated levels of lead. Your child won't be additionally exposed, and so that other children won't potentially be exposed. When the department gets those results from the doctor's office, they'll send an investigator or a tester to your apartment and they'll do a test. I can obtain those results from the Department of Health for you and take a look at what the Department of Health found. And if the Department of Health finds that there was lead paint in your apartment, there were places in your apartment that had chipped or cracked or peeling paint, then we can make a claim against your landlord for the lead poisoning that your child suffered. How much your case is worth, or how much your child's case is worth, will depend on the level of lead that's in your child's system and the impact that that lead has had on your child. The higher the lead level and the greater the impact, the greater the recovery amount. We've had some children who've had very low lead levels with very minimal impact who we've been able to get recoveries for. I can tell you there have been some children that we've represented who've had very high lead levels and who have had devastating impacts to them as a result of those lead levels. And we have been able to get them substantial recoveries as a result because they were entitled to it, because their lives were very badly affected as a result of the lead poisoning that happened to them. I had one child I represented who had a very high lead level, had very significant impact on his life as a result of those high lead levels, and we got him a recovery of $5 million. I had another child who also had very severe lead poisoning as a result of the landlord failing to comply with the requirements of the City of New York, and we got him a recovery of $2 million. Recoveries can vary depending on the seriousness of the impact that the lead has had on your child. If you have a child who has been lead poisoned and you live in a New York City Housing Authority building, call us and we'd love to represent you and get your child the compensation they're entitled to. It costs nothing to contact the Orlow Firm. We provide a free consultation. We'll be happy to talk to you, make inquiries about what happened, find out about your situation. And then if you have a case, we will meet with you, sign you up, and you pay nothing unless and until we recover for you. An experienced attorney can, first of all, make sure that you're meeting all your deadlines and meeting all the legal requirements that are necessary for you to have a case in the first place. But also, once you start your case, you need a good lawyer to make sure that you are getting what you are entitled to. You have insurance companies whose only job it is to make sure that you do not recover, or if you are going to recover as little as possible. So it's important that you have somebody experienced fighting for you on your side to make sure that you get everything that you're entitled to.
Hi, my name is Brian Orlow. Call me today for a free consultation.